Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the regular business meeting for the District of Squamish for Tuesday, March 1st. Atsqualo Queesaluktamuk, Latsquahopmish, Okameo. We are meeting tonight on the traditional unceded territory of the Squamish Nation. Council may I have a motion to adopt the agenda. Moved by Council French, seconded by Council Pettengill. Any opposed? Motion carries. Just want to reflect that Councillor Stoner is joining us electronically from home this evening. She is here. Thank you. Council, any notice of motion? Seeing none, we do not have any delegations, petitions, or proclamations this evening. Item 5 is consideration of unscheduled public attendance. So this is anyone who feels they have an item that cannot wait for 2 weeks until the next regular business meeting. So that is *3 on the telephone. Raise your hand on the participants panel or in the audience here. Just raise your hand. Seeing none. Under item 6, we do have a public hearing this evening. So this is for District of Squamish Zoning Bylaw Amendment Bylaw for CD 99 Hunter Place, number 2634, 2018. So I just have a statement I need to read to open the hearing, and then we'll turn it over to staff for their presentation. This public hearing is being held pursuant to the Local Government Act requirements to allow the public to present and to provide submissions to council respecting the proposed bylaw in front of us this evening. This is District of Squamish Zoning Bylaw, Amendment Bylaw for CD 99 Hunter Place, number 2634, 2018. Everyone present will be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard or provide a written submission. We want to ensure that no one is discouraged or prevented from making their views known, whether speaking in favor or against the proposed zoning amendment. Please ensure that your remarks are relevant to the matters contained in the proposed bylaw. And for those attending in person, there's no clapping or cheering or comments when speakers are presenting, please. We want to keep this a neutral and safe space for people to make their submissions. Please note that the public hearing is not an opportunity for members of the public to have their questions answered by staff or by council. Any questions or points of clarification can be directed to staff by contacting the planning department. Members of council, however, may ask clarifying questions following presentations. Council is here to listen and will not debate the merits of the proposed bylaw with the public or each other during the public hearing. Please note that this public hearing is being recorded and web streamed live, and the recording will be posted to the district's website. Media are often present at public hearings, and the public should feel free to advise the media if they don't want their picture taken. Up to and as part of this hearing, the public has had the opportunity to make submissions to council. If any submissions were received, they are available for review and comment and have been included as part of the staff's report. Any submissions received after the agenda was published have been added to the electronic agenda and to the electronic public hearing package available on the district website. Any submissions made during the hearing can be reviewed during the hearing by viewing the electronic agenda. Submissions will be uploaded by staff as they are received. As I said, we're trying to make this hearing a safe space for everyone to voice their opinion without interference from others. Therefore, I ask that members of the public maintain order and quiet during the hearing. Please do not applaud or interrupt any speech or action of members of council or any other person addressing council. I'll now ask the planning department to outline what the bylaw is proposing.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Jessie Fletcher, planner with the District of Squamish. Presenting with me tonight is Devin Kianaga, municipal engineer. And tonight we're here to present bylaw number 2634, 2018 for Council's information prior to public hearing. Prior to going into the presentation, the proponent has provided a 3D visualization that we will try to play, but it might not work really well with the bandwidth, so we're going to give it a go. So just bear with me one moment. Okay. All right, so that was their video submission, and I will just go ahead and share my presentation. Okay, here we go. So the subject lands are designated mixed employment in the official community plan. The application, if approved, would be subject to Development Permit Area 2, Development Permit Area 3, and Development Permit Area 6. The subject site is split zoned 1100 and 1140 Hunter Place are partially zoned C4, that's downtown commercial, while the remainder of the site is zoned I1 light industrial. The applicant is proposing to rezone the subject site to a mixed-use comprehensive development zone. The site plan includes 5 distinct buildings connected by a common courtyard at grade. Public access to the courtyard will be secured by statutory right-of-way as detailed in the bylaw requirements. The developer proposes to partially sink the parkade below grade to create a continuous pedestrian area extending from the public realm throughout the site. These are some renderings of the proposed development. Form and character will be reviewed at development permit. Employment space in the updated proposal has increased to 30% of the gross floor area. If the employment space is realized and fully tenanted, it would create approximately 208 jobs in the development compared to a residential population of 410. The rezoning seeks to change the zoning on the I1 zone parcels, while the use and density on the C4 parcels would remain largely unchanged in the proposed comprehensive development zone. The proposed height is 30 meters and 6 stories, with the office building permitted to go to 7 stories. Parking is anticipated to meet the bylaw. This application triggers the community amenity contribution policy. The applicant has proposed that CACs be calculated on the increase in density on the I1 zoned land only, which is consistent with the CAC policy. The applicant has increased their affordable housing contribution to 17.5% of the new gross floor area to be affordable units instead of the 10% that is typically required. This slide outlines some of the items that will be secured in the land development agreement, including acoustic requirements and other rail requirements as detailed by CN Rail, electrification of all residential and office units, including the hot water tanks, while the office building will be constructed of mass timber. The number of childcare spaces, including the higher requirement of space per child. Design drawings of active transportation accommodation north of the site to Buckley Avenue, Cleveland Avenue intersection. Language that holds the developer responsible for raising infrastructure along Pemberton Avenue. Language that secures the full build out of frontage along Hunter Place and Pemberton Avenue. A covenant securing travel direction, access, and future maintenance of the north-south lane along the east side of the building, and approximately 40% of the courtyard to be activated with public access. This will also include covering all required Class B bicycle spaces and the additional Class A bicycle spaces. There have been 3 changes since second reading to the land development agreement proposal. The first is regarding private amenity space separation. Council asked for clarity about how private and public amenity space would be delineated in the courtyard. The applicant provided a detailed description that is in the staff report and will be incorporated into the land development agreement to help guide future development permits. Essentially, in summary, the developer's landscape team proposes to use different path widths and planting styles as visual cues to delineate between the public and private realm in the courtyard. The use of planters and hedging and small fencing can be incorporated to further delineate between these spaces, though too much separation does take away from the visual connection between the public and private space, which can be important for safety. So a thorough review will be required at development permit. The second change is regarding the no gas covenant. The developer has committed that all uses at the development will enter into a no gas covenant, including the ground floor retail. And finally, regarding the lane, the developer has offered to enter into a legal agreement to allow for public access to the lane along the east side of the development in the event that the adjacent parcels redevelop and enter into an agreement to expand the lane onto their adjacent property to address concerns about future connectivity between Pemberton and Hunter Place. The applicant has agreed to register the statutory right-of-way for public access. However, the applicant will also register a covenant in the district's favor that would allow the developer and future strata to dictate vehicle flows through the lane. This allows the district to remove the covenant restricting vehicle access at its full discretion in the event that the need arises to provide an alternative road access between Hunter Place and Pemberton Avenue. Staff would like to reiterate that a separate vehicle access is not seen as necessary for this development, but this solution is intended to help assuage concerns regarding a future condition that would necessitate this ability. This condition would likely only occur in the event of adjacent property redevelopment. This development can function with full access from Hunter Place only and does not drive a need for additional road at this location. The developer has requested that language in the land development agreement regarding crossing improvements be written in such a way that at servicing the agreement, if staff find that improvements to the rail crossing are not necessary, those funds could be redirected to other servicing needs in the area. Staff will now clarify 3 items from the previous meeting. A question was raised regarding how the affordable housing units will be managed in relation to the new Affordable Housing Society. Housing units will be managed as detailed in the district's perpetual affordable housing policy. The Squamish Community Housing Society will enter into a partnering agreement with the district regarding continued affordability and an operating agreement with the landowner. The society will manage occupancy of those units, but ownership of the units will remain with the developer. I will pass it over now to my colleague, Mr. Kiyonaga. And if Mr. Kiyonaga, you want to let me know when you'd like me to move the slides.
Thanks, Jesse, will do. So we wanted to provide some further clarification on the future Pemberton Road condition. So this project includes raising of Pemberton Avenue to meet the height of the future dike. So for context, the road will meet the height of the adjacent rail crossing to the west, while it slopes down to meet the adjacent road grade to the east. A retaining wall is being proposed along the south edge of the road right-of-way with a maximum height of around 2 meters at the very west end, getting smaller as it goes to the east. Now, all adjacent properties would retain legal access to Pemberton Road, and the developer would be required to provide practical access to the same extent that exists at the servicing agreement upon completion. The proposal here is showing stairs down to the retaining wall, but this also could be a ramp or some other feature. Now, the benefits to raising the road include the ability to partially underground the parking for the Hunter development, which would provide a more enriched pedestrian environment that really isn't possible in many locations in Squamish. It would also provision for improved flood protection for the properties to the north once the road is raised all the way to the highway. This is an interim measure until the future sea dike is built. The road would also meet the same elevation of the future sea dike, which would make for a better pedestrian and vehicle transition and use of that area. Finally, construction of Pemberton does not preclude the closure of Pemberton Avenue to vehicle traffic in the future. So such a closure that may require, but that would require probably the properties to the east of the subject to provide a north-south lane in the same way as the lane of that is part of this proposed development. And this would have to be negotiated at the time of those adjacent properties developing. Next slide, please. Next. So we also want to provide more clarity on the proposed road between the railway tracks and the development. So in 2020, the property owner to the east of the development approached staff with concerns about vehicle access to Pemberton via the rail crossing once the bridge over the Mamquam blind channel is built. Now, they hired a consultant to review their concerns and provide recommendations and how to mitigate them. The recommendation was to replace the rail crossing with a road along the east side of the rail line connecting Hunter Place to Pemberton Avenue. The key concerns here were that the grades were not meeting the requirements for trucks, and the intersection with the intersection that we built with the bridge coming in would not have adequate distance from the railway tracks. Their consultant prepared a cost estimate as well, suggesting that closing the crossing and building the proposed road would be the less expensive option due to the upgrades required at the rail crossing. Now, this cost estimate was based on some key assumptions that I'll speak to in a moment. They also pointed out closing the rail crossing will give the opportunity to remove whistling from this location. Now, we definitely took these concerns very seriously, and we do appreciate the input because, I mean, ultimately we do rely on input from general public as one thing that helps us inform our decisions. So as a result, we put this rezoning on hold until we knew if these concerns would impact the design. Ultimately, staff has to look at this though under the context of rezoning. So for example, if we found that an intersection at the north end of the planned bridge was not feasible, meaning that we would have to close the rail crossing, and an alternative access to Pemberton was required, then this would have big impacts on this proposed rezoning. We would have to secure some sort of way to get that road in. You can flip it around the other way, and the other question is whether this rezoning actually triggers the need to close that crossing. So we need to look at it from both angles. Next slide, please. So what did we do? First, we hired a consultant to complete a traffic impact assessment specifically for an intersection at the north end of the bridge. This assessment looked at the feasibility of different scenarios. So for example, with or without turning lanes, signalization or not. We confirmed that an intersection can function adequately and safely here, meaning that vehicles can turn into and out of Pemberton East without unacceptable delays and without unacceptable vehicle queuing. Now, second, we had our consultant then complete a conceptual design because the first step showed us that it is technically feasible by the numbers. Next, we had our consultant complete a conceptual design to confirm that it would actually fit at this location. Now, this did confirm that we can fit an intersection at this location, and this includes meeting the grade requirements to accommodate trucks and to provide adequate distance from the rail crossing. Finally, we looked at the impacts of the proposed rezoning on the overall traffic network and confirmed that this development does not drive the need to close the rail crossing. Next slide, please. So, staff's conclusion is that the proposed alternative access is not required either right now nor as a result of this development or as due to construction of the bridge. Now, going back to those key concerns, we can meet the required grades and setbacks from the railway tracks. The cost estimate completed by the neighbor's consultant does not take into account the land that we would need to purchase for the road and assumes that the district would be paying for all the railway crossing upgrades. Now, our opinion is that since the developer will be paying for the rail crossing upgrades, it will actually be less expensive to keep the rail crossing open than it would be to close it. We will also always be keeping a pedestrian crossing open here, which means that there is no guarantee that CN will agree to stop whistling at this location. Next slide, please. So additionally, the proposed alternative road only provides a 15-meter right-of-way, which does not meet district standards. The minimum road right-of-way width that we would require here is likely 20 meters. The proposed road is not being proposed as part of the rezoning in question today. And once again, we are required to review this in the context of this development, which is what we have done. Once the bridge is built, the most direct route to Pemberton for fire trucks and ambulances will be over the bridge and across the railway tracks. So even if we close the bridge to general traffic, we'll want to keep this open as an open access for emergency services. Next slide, please. Some additional reasons why we do not support the proposed road alignment would be the impact to the quality of active transportation that is being proposed here. The OCP designates this area as a mixed employment, which means we expect less or no large truck traffic to the end of Pemberton when this area is finally fully built out. The proposed road would also commit the district to owning and maintaining additional infrastructure. So finally, if this area is going to go the way of the WUNERF, which is a road that is pedestrian focused, where pedestrians have priority, then committing to a dedicated road to this location in addition to what we already have seems unnecessary. Due to all of the above, staff do not feel that this is the superior option at this time. So we did communicate this information back to the neighbor's agent, and we did not hear back. Next slide, please. Okay, so to reiterate, questions raised by the neighbor are very good ones. And closing a rail crossing is always nice. If we can close it to any extent, it's always a nice thing to be able to do. Recognizing this, staff has worked with the developer to see if there's an opportunity to ensure the proposed Hunter rezoning does not prohibit closure of the crossing. So the applicant of the Hunter Place development, they did not support allocating land for the development to accommodate this road as proposed. However, they are proposing to provide a public access right away along the proposed lane along the east side of the property, as Jesse has explained. Now, this lane is currently not proposed to be wide enough for two-way traffic. However, when the properties to the east develop, they will have the ability to add to the lane and provide a right-of-way as well, essentially creating an alternative access to Pemberton. Now, this could enable us to close the crossing to the general public at that time. Additionally, the money being provided for upgrading the crossing will be provided such that if for some reason the crossing does not need to be upgraded, it can be used for other district improvements as Jesse mentioned. So it is, I will reiterate though too, it is staff's opinion, however, that the rail crossing will need to be upgraded. So finally, there was a question about vehicles turning right off of the bridge and onto Pemberton, potentially causing a blockage of the bridge traffic due to being stopped by a train. While this is possible, it's unlikely to happen that often. If it were to become a problem though, and as had been mentioned in past presentations, we will have the ability to require all traffic from the development to be directed to Hunter Place, which will greatly alleviate that issue. With that, I will pass it back to Jesse.
Thank you, Devin. So to inform the community, per policy, the project was posted to the district's development showcase and 2 development signs have been posted at the site. No comments or requests for a public information meeting were received, but 1 was held and 4 comments were received as part of the public information meeting. Public notification procedures were followed for the public hearing, including notification to properties within 100 meters. Public hearing notices were placed in 2 issues of the Squamish Chief, the February 17th and 24th editions, which meets the legislative requirements. 9 comments have been received to date, 3 in favor and 6 which raised concern. Those in favor spoke to the positive aspects of office space and childcare facilities. Some of the comments with some concerns, we'd just like to go through. 1, detailed concerns regarding the future of Pemberton Avenue West after the bridge construction, which staff responded to directly as it is largely outside the scope of this application. A comment was received regarding concerns about existing Hunter Place traffic conditions. Staff note that as part of this application, the applicant will need to reconstruct and design Hunter Place to the full extent in front of their development, which will allow for proper engineering of sight lines and help mitigate some of these concerns. Staff have connected with the applicant's engineer to ensure that these issues are addressed at servicing agreement. There was a request to close the rail crossing, a request for public access through the development lane, and a request to ensure continued access along Pemberton throughout construction, and a request for a consultation during servicing agreement. Again, staff do not recommend closing the crossing as detailed earlier in the presentation. A statutory right-of-way over the adjacent lane has been secured, but if the adjacent development would like access prior to a condition that requires access, they would need to negotiate that access directly with the neighbor. Engagement regarding servicing in the area will occur as normal servicing agreement procedures in the event that there are downstream impacts. The development will need to provide continued access on Pemberton throughout development, including during construction of the road, with any disruptions being minimal and communicated with neighbors in keeping with district policies and bylaws. A comment was received regarding expectations regarding this application, including infrastructure upgrades, fire upgrades, parking requirements, storage requirements, construction mitigation, and contributions to a second downtown entrance. Staff would just like to clarify that every development project is responsible for funding the cost of required infrastructure upgrades, that the buildings proposed are mid-rise, so 6 to 7 stories, and the fire department can service them. Buildings that cannot be served by the fire department cannot obtain a building permit. The project does meet the zoning bylaws parking requirements. Each new development in Squamish contributes DCCs towards the second entrance to the downtown. The BC Building Code prohibits the district from requiring storage spaces, and the Fire Code prohibits storage of goods and parking spaces in enclosed parkades. And if the project were to seek a variance at DP, it would be at the discretion of council. The property owner to the south has submitted a letter regarding the change in road grade adjacent to their property. The developer would need to ensure that continued practical and legal access continues to the lot. The district will process any development application received on the lot to the south, and any application will need to meet district bylaws. Any new permanent development on the water side of Pemberton Avenue will require the construction of a sea dike to be considered safe, and the future sea dike will meet the height of the future road. A letter was received regarding increasing water supply, sewage disposal, funding of hospitals and recreation. The district's water aquifer has capacity of approximately 800 liters per second, and on the hottest day, the district draws approximately between 200 and 250 liters per second, with any of our limiting capacity here being the systems of water infrastructure, so pipes, wells, reservoirs, and pipes. All of this gets addressed during the servicing agreement so that the development can meet that capacity. In terms of any other upgrades to infrastructure will be required for anything that is undersized. And regarding recreation, council can choose at any rezoning to direct the critical amenity portion of a community amenity contribution to recreation facilities if they so choose. So following the results of the public hearing, staff recommend that council consider third reading for bylaw number 2634, and prior to the adoption, the land development agreement approval by the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure and registration of a section 219 covenant be secured. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fletcher. So now we get to the public portion, but I just want to check in with council to see if you have any clarifying questions. Councillor Anderson, then Herford, then Race.
Yes, my question is regarding interim access provisions for, need for, scenarios for. The staff report, there's over 2 pages under the title Summary of Vehicle Access to Pemberton Avenue, and the presentation this evening focuses on a proposal for a west side road that was in fact withdrawn by the neighbor property owner over 4 months ago. Since that time, the neighbor property owners have sought a conversation with the district regarding East Lane options, and this is the focus of my question. East Lane as interim access solutions, interim during construction, anything that comes up over the time and until that east end of the Pemberton Avenue is developed. Now, the laneway is proposed for the better part of its length as one way, northbound, and it is 5 meters wide. I can appreciate there are some constraints on the width, the design width here, with the property line and the building proposed. Pemberton Avenue, however, is also only 5 meters at this time. So what are the scenarios that staff see for practical interim access, and why not here on the East Lane? And I might just add, why not put, now I'm just going to go back and quote Ms. Fletcher, the need to negotiate, the neighbors will need to negotiate directly with the property owner for use of that lane or other access. Why not put this as a condition or address this in the LDA? So my issue is interim access before development of the east end of Pemberton Avenue for those adjacent property owners.
You may clarify if you need to, Ms. Fletcher.
Sorry, through the chair. It's certainly possible we can talk to the developer about providing interim access, but they'll be required to provide access through Pemberton. at all times. It's a construction management issue. It's not a land use issue. Right? There'll simply be, you can't simply block access to somebody's property. They'll have to figure out how to build that road and maintain access through at all times. That's a simple requirement. I say it's not a land use issue. That's a construction management issue.
This then will address the dike construction or the raising of Pemberton Avenue and the work to be done there.
Sorry, that was a question, sorry?
Oh, excuse me. The construction phase that will potentially have impacts on access will be that Pemberton Avenue raising to dike level. So that during that construction phase, we are satisfied that there will be practical access available.
Yes.
May I follow up with another issue, and that is that the skewed T intersection, Pemberton and the future Laurelwood to Pemberton Bridge, has a very difficult angle if you're driving northbound over the bridge and going to turn right onto Pemberton Avenue. That may well be very tricky and inconvenient for a tractor trailer unit, or for example, a heavy piece of equipment, or for example, for fire equipment. And so this is another issue for ensuring adequate access, alternate access. And again, I come back to the East Lane, whether there should be, this might be addressed in the land development agreement concerning that in all of these scenarios, that this be available and an agreement be addressed to ensure that that's available. A truck may have to use the Cleveland 99 intersection. It may not be practical to turn off that bridge right onto Pemberton, and this has been addressed by one of the traffic consultants.
Mr. Kianaga?
Through the mayor, thank you. Yep, you're absolutely correct. There will be certain scenarios where vehicles will not be able to make that right-hand turn. That right-hand turn will not be designed for a tractor trailer or for a large, say, truck with a large trailer behind it. We did look at it from the perspective of fire rescue, and a smaller fire truck would be able to make that turn without encroaching into the oncoming lane. The way that we currently had the design looked at, or the conceptual design provided, a ladder truck, so our largest fire truck, would not be able to make that turn without encroaching onto oncoming traffic. From a traffic engineering design perspective, I understand that that is acceptable in this scenario because of the infrequent nature and the emergency, the context of the emergency that turn would have to be made. That being said, I did check, and it is possible to have the adequate turning radius to fit a ladder truck, to make that truck turning movement. That being said, that changes the scope of that intersection. We'd have to dive into that further as to what the impacts would be. But you're right. In order to bring trucks to Pemberton east, they would have to come down Cleveland as they do right now.
Thank you, Chair.
Mr. Valniskis, did you want to add to that?
Yes, thank you. The only thing I would add is the question around the lane and whether the lane should allow for traffic to other properties in that area. It's simply not big enough, and it's not designed for access to the greater area. It will be big enough as an alternative access once the properties next door develop. So in the future scenario, it will be. It's just not practical to allow vehicles use that laneway as a freeway at this time.
Thank you. Councillor Herford.
Thank you. And thank you for the clarity around the continued access throughout construction. And that's a jigsaw puzzle I don't have the answers to, but that's something that they're going to have to provide. So it's good to hear that. My first question anyways, is the properties on the water side. There was a couple scenarios discussed around providing access. The one showed some stairs and there was a mention of some ramps. How are those decisions to be made? And is it engaging with those property owners? Or are they just going to get what they get? Is there opportunities for them to negotiate more of a pullout of the side of the road or I don't know what the possibilities there are, but I feel like some of the concerns sort of in general with this have been around that consultation with the adjacent properties. So I'm curious how that piece would come together. Yeah, given that there's a bunch of new energy going into that zone, is there a way to ensure that there's collaboration on whatever those solutions are?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. So the access, the practical access, will be determined at the time of the servicing agreement. And a good example is Waterfront Landing and the raising of Laurelwood Road to get over the railway bridge in just across the channel there. You know, we had an instance there where there was a neighboring property. I think it was a landscaping company that, you know, needed access established as part of that raising. And through the servicing agreement, we worked with the property owner to make sure that whatever level of access they had at the time before the road went in and was raised, maintained after the road went in. So, you know, the challenge here is there is one very small property on the channel, and it is yet to be proven whether there's any feasible use on that property, just given its size, given its location, proximity to the channel, the floodproofing requirements. It's as complex as it gets from our perspective. So I think that we have a development permit application for that property for development, and we're going to have to go through that process with the property owner to see if there's any feasibility in developing it. And if at the end of the process there is feasibility and the applicant has approvals and the means to develop that property, you know, we're still probably 2 years at least away from entering into a servicing agreement on this project. So there seems to be enough time for those deliberations. And when we do the servicing agreement, at that time, we're going to have to look at every property along there and see what the practical access is there today, what immediate plans they have, and how all that can work together. But the property owners have to go through the process themselves, you know, if there's no development on the property, to show that it is feasible.
Thank you. And those discussions happen, including those property owners at that time and servicing agreements at that time.
Through you, Mayor, that's correct.
Thank you. A few issues of sort of traffic circulation have sort of bubbled to the surface through this process, which aren't necessarily the responsibility of this development, but they're legitimate concerns, I feel, for both the neighborhood. We heard some from further down sort of the south end of Pemberton, and some things on Hunter Place, which I was happy to hear that the sightlines are going to improve with this work, and as well as to the sort of the far end, butting up against the highway. And where will those live? I don't want to lose those, because I think they're important, and I think that there's opportunities to improve them, and it sort of put a magnifying glass on this area. But I don't necessarily think that that's directly responsible for this development either. But I don't want those to just go away, seeing as we've all heard them. So does staff have any, like, where do we go with some of those things? Are there future processes or opportunities? Because as, I don't know, highway improvements happen, maybe there's opportunity to improve the far end of Pemberton. As we design the Pemberton Road off the bridge, maybe there's a way to incorporate that feedback into the future road design there, and so on. So I'm just curious where, if staff had given any thought into where those do belong, because I don't think they necessarily belong directly in this application, but that doesn't mean that they're not real concerns. So that could be addressed somewhere along the way.
Through the mayor, probably best addressed in the individual capital projects relating there too. So whether or not it's the downtown entrance, and then the work that we're going to have to do on Pemberton once the bridge is built, because fundamentally Pemberton will change once the bridge is built, because the elevation's changing for sure. So at that point, we can start to address those issues around parking and access and those sorts of issues. I think those best reside in those capital projects when we get to them. So they're a few years out at least, but that's where we can deal with those issues.
Thank you. And I just see an opportunity with the to potentially address some of this stuff down at the very far end. And I appreciate that answer. Pemberton is going to be substantively different on the sort of on this side of the tracks. But with the hopefully upcoming works with the 99 to the intersection there, I wonder if it comes down that far and if there's an opportunity that comes up for us to address some of the concerns that have been raised as these things happen. So they need to be sort of on a radar. So I'll leave it there for now, and I'll try to circle back to these when I see them. But I want to make sure that kind of all eyes are on those opportunities for general improvement.
Councillor Rice.
Thank you. One of the advantages of being third to speak is my first two questions have been asked and answered. So I'm left with this still a question with respect to this lane. And if I understand the staff report, and I'm a little bit fuzzy about part of it, during construction, Pemberton Avenue will be maintained as an access. Fine. The goal is to end up with this Winnerf Road, some kind of a road, which I'm not exactly sure, but I imagine something that's more have paving stones or something of that nature as opposed to asphalt or concrete. And at the outset, when the construction happens, one of the first things, of course, it's going to be built is the parking garage, the very bottom level of this development. And the lane is on top of that, I understand. Am I correct in saying that? Yes. I think so.
That is correct, yes.
Thank you. And that's going to be a right of way, not a dedication as a road. But then it struck me, so then the building gets built or buildings start getting built. And Pemberton, Pemberton Avenue is still open and is being used for access to properties on the eastern side of end of Pemberton Avenue. And the lane is there. But am I correct in hearing that the lane would not be used as long as there was access on Pemberton Avenue? Was that so? The landowner has the ability to say, no, don't use the lane. You can use Pemberton Avenue. Is that a correct statement?
Yeah, through the mayor, that is a correct statement. And just to add a bit more clarity, so the proposal is being proposed to be built in 3 phases. So phase 1 would not the entire parkade and not the lane at the same time. The lane would be the last portion to be constructed over time, which makes it a bit more difficult to visualize. But during construction of Pemberton, which includes the raising of Pemberton, access for eastern properties would need to be maintained at all times. And then the idea of the lane is in the event that something happened where we needed to close the crossing, which would likely occur when the properties to the east were to redevelop and that lane was expanded, the district would have the ability to remove the covenant where the strata or the owner at that time controlled movement through the lane. And then that would provide an alternative access. So in the event that we needed an access there, the district would have the ability to then pull off the covenant and only the statutory right of way would be in place for public access.
I think that's maybe the part that I missed. So it is the district that would be able to take away that restriction if the district decided that that was now going to be the main access to Pemberton, to the east part of Pemberton.
Through the mayor, that is correct. But in the interim, the strata would have the ability to manage traffic flows.
Got it. But that leaves me with the last part of my question then. So for some period of time, we're going to have business as usual for the eastern end properties over this new Werner, whatever it is, road. Will it be able to stand that kind of traffic? Are those roads designed for heavy trucks and things of that nature?
Through you, Mayor. Yes, it will have to be designed with that type of traffic in mind. So WUNRF doesn't mean that it will, it has to be paving stones. It could still be asphalt. It's just could be painted. It's a different streetscape concept where it's very open and the street is essentially shared by all the users without delineating too much exactly who's going where. And they've shown to be to work. It generally slows down traffic. It's the same idea as the Pac West proposal between Pac West and the pavilion on was it Vancouver Street? Yeah. So it doesn't have to be the same treatment. The idea is to slow down traffic and kind of open it up into, you know, a multi-use space.
Okay, I don't want to get into a discussion about Main Street right now. That'll go on. Okay, thank you. So that sort of the features of that then get decided at the land development agreement or the service agreement stage?
That will be through the servicing agreement. We will enter into a commitment with the land development agreement, and then design happens at servicing stage.
Final question. Is it absolutely certain that that end of the blind channel or the lands at that end of the blind channel have to be protected by a sea dike, or are there other alternatives? And I'm thinking of some form of soft edge, such as on the Cattermole, that might be suitable. I understand the need for flood proofing, but is it a certainty that there will have to be a sheet pile dike, or are there other treatments that might also be able to be used there?
I saw Mr. Kiyanaga's hand, but it might have been for the previous question and now for this one. So he's got two hands up, so I'll go to him first.
Thank you. Through the mayor, I'll answer your last question first. So I don't believe it is prescriptive. David Rolston would definitely know better than me, but I think the issue, from what I understand, is that the space constraints are very difficult to work with because pushing fill into or pushing material into the blind channel would be very hard to get supported. We have issues with DFO approvals and whatnot. So I think my understanding is that we anticipate it would likely have to be a sheet pile dike or something of that sort, simply due more to space constraints. Going back to the other question about the WUNRF approach for that road, I think we should point out that and make it clear that we're not going to be able to make it a full WUNRF approach or pedestrian focused approach until the rest of that road builds out, because there will be that road still needs to be dedicated to vehicles, or not dedicated, but it needs to be more vehicle centric at first, because we have active businesses on the east end of that road. So the idea with this project and keeping that long-term vision, I guess, in mind, is to ensure that at the servicing agreement stage, we capture a street design that doesn't or that allows us to easily convert and build out the rest of that road as more of a WUNRF. So that could look at like flat panel curbs versus barrier curbs or something of that sort. So I just want to make sure that's clear, so we don't have mixed expectations.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Pettengill.
Yeah, thanks. So my understanding for some reason was that this was meant to be our diking solution rather than a temporary solution. Is there a reason why we couldn't say this road is sufficient for our diking?
Mr. Kianaga, you spoke to this last time, so I'll go there first, and then Mr. Valniskis or Mr. Buxton.
Thank you. Yeah, through the mayor. Yeah, so that's a great question. And I think the last time we had spoken, I had suggested that the road, if we chose to change our policy, could be turned into the dike rather than going with a sea dike. I was mistaken on one point, which is that that requires significant land improvements, which is probably unrealistic for this road. So that is not what's being proposed under this rezoning. So the road will be raised, it will provide protection. So if this road connects all the way to the highway and the sea dike is not built, it still provides essentially an interim dike measure and still provides protective measures, but it won't be classified or considered at the level or the standard that we would need to be a permanent diking or dike solution. So I hope that answers your question. So we would expect that we would still need a sea dike in addition to that.
Mr. Buxton, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, just further, if we wanted to pursue it, as Mr. Kianaga said, if we wanted to pursue it as a formal dike, that's an approval by the inspector of dikes. It gets significantly more complex and expensive, and probably not necessary at this point in time.
Okay, thank you. And maybe I'm going too far down the diking path road, but am I correct in thinking that effectively, because of the space constraints, to do a proper dike, we would effectively end up raising this portion of the land where the road is anyways? Is that a realistic assumption? Or could you put a dike, have a dip, and then, like, it just seems, from what I've seen of diking diagrams on so far, either way, the road is eventually getting raised. Is that accurate?
Yeah, through the mayor. So you could have a dike and then have the land go down afterwards behind it. You need a minimum of a 15-meter setback where you would have fill in order to anchor your dike. So that would be getting very close to the road. So we anticipate it makes more sense to raise the road in this scenario.
Councilor Herford? Then I would like to go to the public.
I have two that are quick, I'm sure. Thank you. I was just thinking about the public access piece during construction, and when I go down there, I'm generally on my bike, and I know that it's used as a route to school and so on. And I'm just wanting to make sure that our access piece during construction was strong enough for that and didn't just provide, say, go through the 99 intersection, and that's not an acceptable solution. And you know, when during some of the construction periods that I've seen around town, the access has been there, but it's been quite chunky to get through with a vehicle. And now we are looking at putting lots of people walking, pushing strollers, little kids on bikes, and I want to make sure that we get to that standard. Is that already been considered by staff, and are those regulations strong enough to ensure that happens, which is sort of above and beyond just practical access during construction?
Yeah, through the mayor. Yes, we have considered that. We have discussed that with the applicant, and they are very aware that they have to keep access along that road for those properties to the east, as well as for that trail. There's no doubt this is going to be very significant traffic control required. Now, how we capture the requirements is really captured at our work permitting stage. So when they get through to the construction phase, our traffic bylaw is really what we enforce it under, and we do that. The mechanism we use is the tool we use is the work permit.
Thank you. And then the last one is just to go to this laneway piece one more time, is the way it's constructed on top of the underground parking. Does that have any practical implications as far as significantly limiting the load that could be carried across the top of it, like a bridge? To me, it's essentially a bridge over some parking spots. And is that done? And to what standard is that done?
Through the mayor, yep, you're absolutely correct. They will have to take that into consideration. Now, currently it's being proposed that lane is used for deliveries, so there'll have to be a design vehicle for that, for the use of that lane, and they're going to have to design structurally for that design vehicle.
So that would be like a 5-ton truck, or which design vehicle, I suppose, or how is that selected?
Who wants to take that one? Yep.
Okay, sorry, what was that?
Is that you, Mr. Kianaga?
I can answer first. I can't see the rest of other than beside Jesse, so I don't know who else is trying to talk. So yeah, that's a great question. I don't know off the top of my head what the design vehicle is being contemplated for this at this point.
Thank you. Most of the restaurants that I see end up using a truck and trailer setup, so it'd have to be pretty sizable, and that might be a sticking point later in the process, but I'll just put that there for now. Thank you.
Ms. Fletcher, in the CAC calculations, we talk about the building for the office building being 6 or 7 stories, but the CACs are calculated on the total potential floor area.
Through the mayor, that's correct. But the employment space is not included in CAC calculations, only residential.
So the CACs are for everything in the I-1 zone that is residential.
That is correct. So the land lift on the overall and taking the C4 portions into consideration as their base density.
Thank you. All right. Council, not seeing any more hands. We should probably ask the public if they have any comments. So I'll now ask the applicant or their representative to comment on the proposed zoning if they so choose, after which anyone else will be given the opportunity to speak or make a submission. I do have a speakers list here with a one name on it, but there may be more people online. After these first speakers, I will call for any other interested parties to speak, and then you simply need to raise your hand and wait to be recognized if you're here at City Hall. If you're participating on telephone or WebEx, the instructions will be posted on the screen, but you basically raise your hand by dialing *3 on the phone or via WebEx. You open the participant panel and you click on the hand icon. Once it is your turn to speak, I will ask for you to approach the podium or begin your comments online by clearly stating your name and address or neighborhood. And please note that speakers will have 5 minutes to address council so that we leave time for everyone to be heard. If you don't finish everything you want to say within those 5 minutes, you're certainly welcome to speak a second time, but I will go to all first-time speakers first. If you are joining by phone or WebEx, when it's your turn to speak, you'll actually receive a voice prompt via telephone, or a little dialog box will pop up on WebEx, and we will have a moderator as well. So, and also if you're online, please don't forget to put your hand down once you've spoken. So *3 again on the phone, or the hand icon on WebEx. So, I just want to see if the proponent wishes to speak. I don't think they're in the room here at City Hall, but is it?
Mayor Elliott, the proponent is online, but the hand is not raised.
All right, so I'll start with my speakers list here at City Hall. Mr. Alan Barr, if you want to approach the mic, you can take your mask off once you get to the podium. And just state your name and neighborhood for the record, and you have 5 minutes.
I wasn't sure of the mask policy, so thanks for clarifying that. I'm Alan Barr, business address 1575 Pemberton Avenue in Squamish, and home address 45 Beach Drive, Furry Creek, BC. Been here 3 or 4 generations, so I knew my way to City Hall, and here I am. So thank you for the opportunity to speak. And I want to thank council, and I sincerely mean this, and Mayor Elliott for your work and service to the community, because I know there's a lot of volunteer, gratuitous time that you put in to help all of us. So I want to recognize that. Sometimes us old guys get a little growly, and I don't mean to be. So I wanted to say that going in, so you might forgive me. Anyways, I'm not opposed to this development. I think it's another exciting thing going on in Squamish. It's just, I'm a little concerned about how it interfaces with those of us who have been there a long time. And Pemberton Avenue has been an interesting, that's certainly east of the tracks where we are, been a real challenged little part of town. And it used to be our main route out of town. And it changed with the new highway upgrade and on it goes. But at one time when we first were there, there was 2 accesses from Pemberton Avenue that took you over towards Hunter Place that we could utilize with heavy industrial traffic. And we still have heavy industrial traffic. We have garbage trucks and fire trucks and commercial transport trucks and logging trucks and loaders and low beds and all those things that come there. But when you get there now, there's no place to turn around. The city garbage truck can't turn around at the end of Pemberton Avenue. A pickup can barely make it and turn around the end of Pemberton Avenue and stay on within the road easement. The road easement is 15 meters wide and we use less than 6 of it. And why is that? Because there's been a number of encroachments within the Pemberton Avenue. There's the fences are over the property line. The highways has moved out and put a big dirt plug on the end where we used to be able to turn around. Hydro poles are 1/3 of the way into the overall right of way and then some, and we can't get turned around. Commercial transport vehicles come down from the terminals with the B train and they don't get to know they're in trouble until they get up and over the tracks. And then they realize, oh my gosh, what are we going to do now? And they can't back up. And sometimes it takes us an hour to turn them around. And I go get a loader and I pull them around. We back them out of there and they go back to the right way. But it just takes one person to shut that whole community down. The whole neighborhood shuts down with that. You see, with this development, I'm really concerned that if we don't figure out a strategy to connect back from Pemberton to Hunter Place, we not only have the existing problem, which has failed miserably, and we either failed to plan or planned to fail previously. I just don't want to see us end up there again. And when the commercial development comes, phase 1 and phase 2 access through the Pemberton Avenue site and the Parkade access through the Pemberton Avenue site and all the commercial industrial traffic that it needs to build the property, all accesses through the Pemberton Avenue site because of sequencing issues and other tenancy issues that are going to force some of that to be more challenged. But we don't have a way to manage the traffic or even turn around the vehicles that are there now. So I think it should be a condition of the third reading that we provide an east-west connector. We maintain an interim east-west connector between Pemberton and Hunter Place, and that as a part of this development that they dedicate a 6 or 6.5 meter wide right-of-way between Hunter Place and Pemberton Avenue. And yes, when myself or the other properties develop, it would be fair and reasonable for us to do the same. But we may not develop for 10 years or 20 years or 30 years. It doesn't solve the Pemberton Avenue problem. And we may not develop at the same time. In other words, because if I give up 6 meters of my property, that would only get us partway there to solving the problem because the alignments of things don't align up and sequence properly. So both myself and my neighbor would have to give it up at the same time for that to actually function and work. So I think it's really important that we address that issue now. And I think it should be a condition of the third reading. I've probably got a lot more on here I should say, but I did bring some maps. If anybody would like one, I'd be happy to give them out. But it shows all the different encroachments that are on Pemberton Avenue. It's done by a legal surveyor, Webster. Unfortunately, I was never able to have an on-site meeting with staff at Pemberton Avenue and point these things out to them. I did manage to get a few counselors and show them, but it's very difficult to make it work as it is now. So it's hard for me to conceive how we could increase the density, increase the activity, and somehow it's going to magically function better without doing something. So that's my point. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Barr. That was very well timed. I didn't even have to give you a warning. All right, next on my speakers list at City Hall is Mr. Peter Gordon. Mr. Gordon, you can approach the podium and take your mask off there, and then you have 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you very much, Mayor Elliott and Council. Thank you for this opportunity to speak at the public hearing this evening. I hope I won't be taking as much time as Mr. Barr, but I just want to reiterate, Council did receive a submission from me with some recommendations that we're asking for some conditions on third reading.
Mr. Gordon, could you just speak your name and address into the record?
I sure can.
Thank you.
My apologies for not doing it earlier. Peter Gordon, 415-1211 Village Greenway, Squamish. Thank you. I think that, to be short with this, that we are concerned that there are some remaining outstanding issues that need resolution that could have a major impact on Mr. Barr and some of his other neighbors down there. And, again, we don't wish to be critical, but you're hearing it a lot that there was a lack of communication leading up to this public hearing today. And we want to see this development go forward. We'd like to see council pass third reading, but at the same time, we feel that the interests need to be looked after, and sometimes it's the devil in the details. And we would like to ensure that with the conditions that council has an opportunity at fourth reading to see, in fact, that those things have been addressed for the neighbors. And we don't intend to stand in the way of the development or stymie it in any way, but we feel that we need to be a part of the ongoing conversation leading through the LDA process, and hopefully we'll make a good quality project of this and those that would follow behind. It's important to recognize that this is this development that's proposed here tonight is the dominant development in that particular neighborhood, and it is leading to some substantial change from the current uses down there. And therefore, I think it's even more important now that these conversations, effective communication take place on this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gordon. I will now, is there anyone else in City Hall that wishes to speak to this? Okay, not see anyone. If you're online and you wish to speak to in the public hearing, please raise your hand, *3 on the telephone, or in the participant panel on WebEx, and click on the hand icon. And I'll just go to our moderator to see if there's anyone who was wishing to speak.
Thank you, Mayor Elliott. We do have a call-in user whose hand goes up and down and then up and down, so they may not be sure they're being noticed or not. So I'm going to try. I'll be right back. Can you hear us, phone-in caller?
Yeah, I can, and I did lower my hand. I'm okay. I was concerned about the number of parking spaces, but I think I can understand it from the documentation. It's okay. Thank you.
Thank you. There are no other callers with their hands up.
So I will go back to council again. If there's anything you've heard in the submissions that you wish to clarify or ask a question about, now is your opportunity. Councillor Anderson, did I see your hand? And then Councillor Race.
I have a question for Ms. Fletcher. One of the items in the current package that we have is a rendering. The title is View Studies from Redbridge, and it's the number A0.3C. And it's a view from across the channel, but it's also a view that our northbound highway travelers would see. And because it's new, I just thought I'd ask. I believe it was back in 2020 when we first reviewed this development proposal that there may have been a link or a reference to the advisory design panel review of this project. And I don't know whether you may recall, but my question is, because this rendering shows the wall facing the highway, that is parallel to the highway, and some people might find it a little bit stark. I actually appreciate many aspects of the architecture and the work that's done on that, but I just wondered if you may recall, Ms. Fletcher, whether there were any comments or recommendations from the advisory design panel, in particular about that wall of the southeast building, whether this there were any comments or recommendations or responses from the applicant on that matter.
Through the mayor, this project has not been to advisory design panel as it is at the rezoning phase, and they have provided several different renderings through the years, and the many renditions at development permit stage, they would need to go through advisory design panel and of course meet our guidelines and seek council approval at that time. So we anticipate we'd do a full review then, whereas right now the massing design is more of a, this is the view impact from these areas and what it could look like. So it's sort of the base model, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. Thank you for the orientation, Ms. Fletcher. I just thought I'd ask because I hadn't seen this rendering and it just kind of popped up at me. And my memory is getting old as far as going back to 2020 and whether that had been reviewed. So you've answered my question. Thank you.
Councillor Race.
Thank you. I just wanted to go to staff and ask if they had a comment on Mr. Barr's suggestion that there be, if I understood it correctly, that there be a north lane or access between Pemberton and Hunter going in that direction. My understanding is the present proposal is just to have one way between going southbound. And I think what Mr. Barr was saying is that they could use a northbound as well.
Through the mayor, yes, so the proposal right now is only to keep it from at once third phase is built from Pemberton north to Hunter Place. The south portion of that lane would be a one-way heading north. It'd be a two-lane or two-way portion from Hunter Place that doesn't make it all the way down to Pemberton. So as per during the presentation, when we reviewed the requirements for whether we would need to have that alternative access or not, staff deemed that it was not required based on all the information that we had.
And just to clarify, you said going north. Is it the whole thing goes north and only part goes south, or the other way around?
So if you were driving from Pemberton into the lane, you could drive from Pemberton north to Hunter Place. If you're driving from Hunter Place, you would have to turn around at I don't remember where it is, if it's the midway point or if it's only maybe a third of the way down. I don't know if you can remember, Jesse, or if you have the site plan with you.
So in summary then, it's full length northbound between Pemberton going to Hunter Place and only partway southbound going from Hunter Place down somewhere south. Am I correct in saying that? Right. Thank you.
Mr. Valaniskas.
Through you, Mayor, I just want to add that that is going to be the current condition once the development is built. If the lane expands in the future, and correct me if I'm wrong, Devin, that would allow for alternative access both ways.
That is correct.
All right, we do have another speaker online. So are there any other council questions before I do that? All right, I'll go to our moderator.
Our next speaker, Mayor Elliott, is Mac McDowell. Mac, if you could just state your name and neighborhood for the record. You have 5 minutes to address council, and you can go ahead now, please.
Hi, my name is Mac McDowell. I live at 39256 Falcon Crescent. My question is regarding the proposed daycare that's going to go in at phase 3. That's on the short end of things. To me, that looks like about 7 years away. And in the meantime, we're going to build all the buildings out for the residents. But at that point, none of those residents will have access to any daycare, which is going to add a ton more pressure onto an already stressed daycare situation in our town, and is going to just push more, how do I say it, like overly priced daycare, which we can already see across the street from Squamish Elementary. Has the developer or can council speak to some kind of plan to mitigate, like, all these people are going to move into the buildings because they're told that daycare is going to arrive at phase 3. But during those phases, there's not going to be any daycare. From the moment of somebody moving in and having a child, their child would be 7 years old before a daycare spot is now available. So can somebody speak to how that's going to be addressed by council? Like, are they going to get the developer to build an interim place to service these residents in some way? That's my question. And I don't know who can answer it.
Thank you for your submission, Mr. McDowell. The public hearing is an opportunity for the public to make submissions, so it's not a Q&A, but certainly council could ask a clarifying question. But the phasing has been discussed by council, including the phasing of the childcare.
So what is the answer then to the phasing of the childcare? Because it looks like the phase of the childcare is in the last phase.
So if you'd like to continue with your submission, you still have 3 minutes left, but I'm just telling you the submissions aren't a chance for a Q&A between council and staff. But if there's more you want to say about the development.
It sounds like the council is asking questions. So that was my question, I guess, for the developer to answer as to what they're doing about mitigating childcare during the development phase. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you. All right. If there are any further speakers at City Hall or online, again, just at City Hall, raise your hand if you wish to speak, and online, *3 on the phone or the hand icon in the participant panel. Mr. Barr, please come forward if you have something more you wish to add to your submission.
Thank you. I don't think I have to repeat my address, do I? Okay. I just wanted to point out that Pemberton Avenue right now, when a commercial vehicle comes down to the end of Pemberton Avenue, the only turnaround that's available to them, anything that's bigger than a pickup, is actually back pretty much at Loggers Lane. So they literally have to back from the end of Pemberton Avenue over the railroad tracks, past the tire shop, and out to where Loggers Lane and the hydro yard is before they can actually turn around without going onto somebody else's property. And the reason that it functioned the way it did over the years is because we had 2 throughways on that Pemberton Avenue East. One was through the proponents where the development is proposed, and the other one was cutting through the property that I have. But there was 2 throughways. So when those commercial traffics or people that got lost in their motorhome or a person with a boat trailer or any of those things, they could get through and get back out. But now, because it's all fenced off and all cordoned off, the only turnaround is back closer to Loggers Lane where the hydro yard is. I'm really worried that if we don't address this issue now, we start the build out, it takes multiple years for this build out to happen, that we're going to have a heck of a mess there for a long, long time before we ever see an opportunity to actually get a second lane and a laneway in that would connect Pemberton Avenue to Hunter Place. So, and I've got these drawings here, which shows some of the encroachment stuff that's going on. I think Councillor Herford made some great points that, you know, through other initiatives that it maybe doesn't belong to this development, we need to keep our eye on the ball wherever we can with some of the encroachment issues that have happened down there over the past, because that's part of why we're in the trouble we're in today. So, thank you. So I'll just leave these. I don't know what the policy is, where I put them. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Barr. I'll go to our moderator. Any hands up online?
No current hands, Mayor Elliott.
Council, one last time. Are there any questions from you? Councillor Stoner and Councillor Herford.
Thank you. Through the chair, I just wanted to confirm vehicle access to the proposed development can be exclusively managed off of Hunter Place. Is that correct? Or is there going to be access from Pemberton?
Through the mayor, the development has been designed and the land development agreement will be written in such a way that in the event that we need to mitigate access to Pemberton, all vehicles from this development can access exclusively off of Hunter Place.
Thank you.
No follow-up, Councillor Stoner? Okay, Councillor Herford.
Thank you. I think there's a good point raised earlier by one of the callers around the phasing, and generally I agree with having a daycare be activated once construction's done. So we don't have a daycare directly adjacent to a construction site. But were there other considerations, or is there a temporary home along the way for a daycare until the final build out happens? Or were there other things considered when this phasing was proposed and accepted?
Through the mayor, when we discussed moving the childcare to an earlier phase with the applicant, because of the limited commercial space in the first two phases, it would preclude the applicant the ability to relocate some of the existing tenants on site. So the trade-off was rehoming existing tenants on site once buildings went up, or providing childcare earlier. The childcare that is secured is of such a size, it's about 3 times the size needed for the number of children required, which gives them more flexibility in terms of after school care and other age care. Whereas if it was into one of the other spaces, it would not be adequately sized. So we, through those trade-offs, agreed that the third phase was likely the best phase for it to go in.
And in other developments, we've seen what appears to be childcare as a commercial use and not necessarily a purpose built. So is there anything precluding an operator, except for maybe a competitive process, from setting up in an earlier commercial space in smaller than the final form that we're seeing in the presentation?
Through the mayor, childcare is a permitted use. So if any of the tenants did not want to move into the new space, there's nothing that would preclude a childcare operator going into an earlier phase, a commercial childcare operator. The third phase does have, in the land development agreement, a contingency that a nonprofit operator be given first right of refusal for the childcare facility, and that space will be dedicated for childcare. But there's nothing that precludes more childcare going in if a commercial operator chose to do so.
Thank you. Or a not-for-profit sort of scaling up the business until it can occupy the bigger space, hypothetically.
Through the mayor, hypothetically, yes.
Anytime you hear hail on the roof at City Hall, you wonder if it's going to fall in. That's right. If anyone's online can see our nervous eyes, we're like, oh, okay. All right, council, last call for questions. I'm going to go back to the public one last time. Then we're going to tie this up in a bow, this public hearing. Councilor Pettengill.
So just to clarify, because you mentioned when we secured a daycare 3 times the size, I think that's what I heard, but there isn't a particular provider secured yet. What we've secured is a space for children that's 3 times what our CACs would normally require. Is that correct?
Through the mayor, it's actually 3 times what Vancouver Coast or the Community Care Act requires. So the indoor space is 3 times the size that's required, and the outdoor space, and some of the outdoor space is covered so that it provides a much better environment. It's in line with the requirements of the City of Vancouver and advanced guidelines, so it exceeds what the minimum requirements are.
All right. Not seeing any more hands from council. I'll just go out to the public again. And just raise your hand if you're here at City Hall, or raise your hand online. So it is a requirement of a public hearing that I ask 3 times if there's anyone else who wishes to speak before we can close the public hearing. So for the first time, is there anyone else who wants to speak or make a submission? For the second time, is there anyone else who wishes to speak or make a submission? Again, *3 or the hand icon in the participants panel. And for the third and final time, is there anyone else, whether here at City Hall or online, that wishes to make a submission this evening? Seeing no further speakers, please note that council members are not permitted to receive any further submissions or hear either from a proponent or opponent to the application once the public hearing has been concluded. So this means that we can't speak to you out in the community or receive phone calls or emails on any of the bylaws until a decision has been made. Any and all communication from this point must be channeled through to our staff. Given that there were no further speakers, I declare the hearing closed, and I want to thank everyone this evening for your submissions, both here at City Hall and online. And thank you, staff, for your presentation. We do have another timed item this evening, which is a development variance permit. Unless staff would prefer that we dealt with third reading now. Okay. So let's do that. Can we suspend the order of the agenda? And move to item 8B1. And this is to consider third reading following the public hearing. So there's staff recommendation there. Is there someone like to move that? Councillor Stoner, you're moving that? I'll second that. Are there any comments? Councillor Stoner, please go ahead.
Thank you, through the chair. I'm moving to support third reading this evening. I think that this rezoning application has come a long way since we first seen it. And it has a lot of good offerings on the table. The 30% gross floor area for commercial space is definitely something that we need in this town. The 25 affordable housing units, as well as childcare space, and being able to covenant some of those affordable housing units for ECE workers are all things that we know we need in our community. I appreciate that it is a trade-off in terms of pushing the phase of the childcare into phase 3, but I think that as a result, we'll get a much better childcare facility available for our community at a standard that we don't typically see. I think the biggest challenge is when you have the first development in an area kind of leading the charge with our flood construction levels and the need to raise roads. It always creates a little bit of a puzzle. And so appreciate hearing from the neighbors in the area in terms of some of the challenges that this may create, but I do believe that we can address them through the servicing agreement and also following up on some of the issues around encroachment and some better signage in order to try and mitigate the impacts that we're currently seeing. I don't think it's fair to burden this specific rezoning with solving all of those issues. And I appreciate the proponents' willingness to provide right away on the laneway so that provides some flexibility in the long term as this area develops over time. So those are my reasons for supporting third reading at this time. Happy to hear from my colleagues. Thank you.
Other comments? Councillor French?
Thanks, Chair. Just speaking in favor of the motion, I want to thank all those who contributed to the public hearing and spoke this evening. Your feedback is valued. I support moving this project forward, and part of my support is due to how cooperative the landowner has been. Changes were requested, and the developer accommodated those changes. This development fits in this spot, and it provides us with another much-needed daycare space, along with a few more housing units that will be priced appropriately for early childhood educators and for those in entry-level jobs. It also furthers the objective of making the downtown area walkable and bike-friendly by providing a significant number of bike storage options for both residents who eventually will live in this area and for visitors alike. I support the motion.
Councillor Race.
Thank you. When I came here tonight, I was actually sort of in the mood to, or of a mind to suggest deferring consideration of third reading till the next business meeting to allow staff to perhaps recraft some of the conditions to pin down some of the concerns around access. But during the meeting with the comments and the answers to the questions, I'm persuaded otherwise this is appropriate to deal with this tonight. I have asked very few questions and have really no comments about the development itself, except to say that I think it is a good use of land, particularly in this area. As Councillor French pointed out, it is eminently walkable to nearby services, groceries, etc., and does contribute to active transportation in this area. So I think this is we talk about densifying the downtown. In some places it may be appropriate, in some places maybe not, but I think in this place it is very appropriate. And all the design renderings we've been shown show for me a very attractive and public-friendly development proposal. My concern since, gosh, I think our first committee of the whole meeting about 4 or 5 presentations ago now has been how it fits into the community around it and the effect on the community around it. And there is both the short-term effect, in other words, during construction and immediately after, and then there's the long-term impact when eventually neighboring properties will want to redevelop, and what do we see the finished product looking like? And I've been concerned about Pemberton Avenue. I think, and generally think that there's maybe too many roads in our downtown area, and this is one candidate to ultimately be closed and just put over to active transportation and perhaps sort of an open space. I recognize that's not realistic in the short term when there is no development and allowing no other access for some of these other properties. But I think the provision of the right-of-way going in a northerly direction and the fact that Pemberton Avenue will have to remain open during construction for traffic flow satisfies me that there will be access and during construction and in the short term after that to allow the neighboring property owners not to be negatively impacted. It's maybe just me, but personally I think that, and our staff should really keep an eye on it, we have the possibility to really create a special area down here with ultimate development. And so I think we should always have that in mind, what we would like the finished product to look like, what the possibilities are for a sort of a car-friendly access to the developments, but not between the developments and the water to be very much people-friendly. And I think that's important. I'm sympathetic to the landowner on the south side of Pemberton Avenue opposite the development. But that is a particularly difficult piece of land to deal with in the sense that the survey I just put in front of me shows it seems to be even less than 50 feet between the boundary and the road. And it raises the question of whether anything could ever be built there. But in the short term, with the road being raised, if anything ever was built there, it would have to be built up at the road level anyway, just for floodproofing, whether the road was raised or not. And so I think it will be in a better place, although still an awkward place after this development. And so I don't think it's the responsibility of this development. I don't think that landowner will be negatively affected. And so for these reasons, I am prepared to support this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Anderson.
I will also be supporting the motion. I'd like to comment, first of all, on the matter of consultation, however. To cite the report from staff today, the OCP designated the lands in this area as mixed employment, which indicates that the need for large trucks accessing this stretch of road is not envisioned for this area's future. During 2016, I was very closely involved in conversations with Planning Department, meetings with Planning Department regarding that designation. It was a solution. There was a need for a solution to recognize the transition that would take place in this area. The development proponent is recognizing that transition and it is granting benefit to current tenants of the Squamish Mills compound. However, this consideration needs to be extended to the whole precinct. And I think that we should be expecting higher with respect to consultations in this circumstance of this mixed employment area. I have previously referred to our district IAP2 public engagement guidelines, and I see that this whole project fits into involve as regards consultations with the next door property owners. The issues are complex, and these people have been there a very long time. I myself have walked through this area literally thousands of times during my lifetime. I think that we should pay attention to Mr. Barr's comments and the information he's provided regarding the constraints of Pemberton Avenue. We have opportunity to do this. There's unresolved issues. I know that staff has gone to work on several of them. But the matter of the load of gravel that's next to the highway, perhaps we can ask our MOTI ministry as they conduct their work in the Cleveland Avenue intersection to respond to longstanding requests to address that pile of gravel, which is a major constraint at the end of Pemberton Avenue. There's other issues we should look at as well. I see it as a suboptimal situation here to address all of these technical engineering issues at third reading. I would have preferred to address that earlier. I would also like to speak to the crossing and the closing of the crossing. Our community is interested in, clearly, there's a lot of discussion about amenities and infrastructure, keeping up with our needs and how to pay for them. Here we're asking a developer, or developers, or this is our situation, is going to spend $600,000, $700,000 into upgrading a railway crossing for vehicles that we should not need before too long. And that's an unfortunate thing. It's while staff has said yes, the staff has said the developer will pay for this crossing upgrade, but is nonetheless an opportunity cost. And I would have liked to have seen options to move up the closure of that Pemberton crossing sooner and save some money allocated elsewhere. I would like to suggest, and I'm hoping that staff will give good consideration for some language or conditions, provisions in the servicing agreement to address the construction management issues that will arise with respect to access for the neighbors. And I'm confident that staff has heard this issue, but we do need some security here, and perhaps some language can be devised in that servicing agreement or elsewhere in the package. Finally, and it is unfortunate, as I've mentioned, I would have been preferred to address all of these technical issues sooner, because this is an opportunity to also talk about the positives in this project. And in closing, Mayor Elliott, I think that this development proposal represents a proactive, careful listening on the part of the proponent. There's innovative building massing here. I think a green building strategy, mass timber as part of it, and that mass timber feature or construction strategy will involve off-site construction, and that's an important strategy, construction management strategy, if you like, to encourage and foster that approach of off-site construction. There's practical, considerate phasing strategy for the current tenants and for the future plans. There's response to our needs for housing, commercial space, childcare, public realm, various amenities. I'll leave it at that. I'm happy to move or to agree to move to this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. I have Councillor Pettengill. Then Councillor Herford.
Thank you. I'll be supporting this third reading. Touch on many of the same things as my colleagues, I think. I do hear the concerns about the vehicle issues, but given the direction of this area, I think it is better managed with signage and warnings about what sort of vehicles are appropriate and what sort of turning around there is or isn't available here. As I've read the reports, we're not losing a formal access with this. It's not solving a perceived access problem or a real problems turning around, but it's not making them any worse, except construction may complicate things. And so I think that will be a critical piece of the construction site management planning. In terms of the daycare, it is a challenging trade-off, but the affordable units going well above our CAC policy is important. And the fact that some of those are dedicated to daycare providers, I think should help the daycare situation in the shorter term, even if the daycare spaces aren't in phase 3. And we are getting more daycare spaces than is the standard. So, it is a tough trade-off, but on balance, I think it makes sense. Just looking at some of the drawings and the fly-through, the 3D fly-through, which I really appreciated even without the music today, it did really strike me that we need to think very carefully about the green space and its functionality for families and kids. I do note there's some playground structure discussion in the designs, but I think really close attention to that is going to be important when we get to that phase. Although it also reminded me that Rose Park is really close to here, and that's a beautiful area. And so it just speaks to thinking about how we design that connection and how we improve that connection to Rose Park, because there's really not a physical barrier to close wonderful park access. There's a bit of a psychological barrier. So that's just something to think about as we get into later phases. And on that note, I think construction access in the shorter term for people on bikes and strollers and running and walking is going to be critically important. And so I thank my fellow councillor for highlighting that. I will be riding home through the hail and that on my bike today. I often pass people on that area, so it's very heavily used, and it's important we keep that accessible throughout the whole process. I think we have to really congratulate this developer for the no gas covenant on the whole thing. This some other communities are starting to see this. This is our second one in Squamish, and it's quite a big one, and it proves really we can do this. So the IPCC report, the newest one, came out yesterday. It's absolutely terrifying, but it does give us some hope that there's a small window to make things through. And I think the sorts of energy choices that we're seeing at this building is where that hope lies for us, that there will be a future. So I think that is a big win, not just for the development, but for our community that we're going that way. Still have a lot of concerns about the amount of cars in this area, but that is our requirement and not the developers. I believe requiring so much parking actually exacerbates all our other parking and traffic problems, but discussion for another day maybe, and one I've raised many times. And then just finally on that note, I do really appreciate the receptiveness of this developer when we spoke about the need for more bike parking if we want to incentivize bike use and so on. The developer was very, very receptive and responsive in adding that. And I think this does set a very good direction for development in our community. Thank you.
Councillor Herford.
Thank you. I'm speaking in support of the motion. This development, as big and complex as it is, meets and in many cases exceeds our requirements. And that's not something I can say about some of the vast majority that come forward. So some of the requirements kind of are more, or the concessions are more recent. The no fossil fuel piece, the right of way on the lane, which I think opens up some options in the future, should they be needed. I want to make sure that we don't lose the feedback we got from the community around the various challenges in the area, and I don't want to minimize those. But I do think that this development will stands a chance of improving a portion of those by looking after some of the sort of the roadscape along Pemberton. It will be complicated along the way during construction, and but that access and guaranteeing that access comes in through some of our other policies. I do want to make sure that I will make the point again of continued access through not only for the property owners, but for our active transportation network through the area that does get used day and night, rain or shine. So something to think about as far as making sure that access is held at the very least to the level it currently is. But I even think through the construction phase, it could be enhanced with some lighting and so on. So I think I'm going to keep a close eye on that, and I know our community is going to keep a close eye on that and how that's managed and by the developer and how we're asking them to do that. I do appreciate the concern around the phasing of the dedicated daycare space. I do think there's opportunity where the other commercial spaces could be used as a daycare, where that daycare space can only be used as a daycare. So perhaps along the way, that will sort of start to crystallize as we as the phasing progresses. And also, I really appreciate sort of think I'd call it the porous nature of this, the way that foot traffic and bicycle traffic can move through the development really makes me hopeful that this will be will actually enhance the movements through the area rather than sort of be a big piece that's just not accessible and is now impeding getting from say Pemberton over to Hunter to do some shopping. You're going to be able to move through that center courtyard, and the effort of the developer to keep everything nice and open there and provide some covered spaces. And I think it's going to be a nice addition to the area. But there are challenges ahead. But I'm confident that we can address those going forward as all eyes are on this. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Herford. I'll also be supporting third reading. But I am mindful that we potentially have a signage and some work to potentially do with the neighbor to the east on the encroachment issues in the short term. There's no reason we couldn't go down there and see what we can do to ameliorate that situation. This developer didn't create it, but it's really hard to sit here and listen to some of those challenges and not think that we can't do something to improve the situation, even if it's not through this rezoning. I heard one of my colleagues speak to the idea of consultation, and I just want to acknowledge that this rezoning was actually put on hold at one point for staff to pick up the feedback from adjacent property owners, stop the discussions with this developer, and investigate that thoroughly. And I think that level of consultation is appropriate when we see a large development coming into a new area that's just experiencing its first change from prior zoning. So I do appreciate that. And what came out of that, I think, is a real acknowledgement about the flexibility that needs to be baked in and has been baked into this rezoning to ensure that we do have room to move down the road depending on how other properties develop or how things may shift as we put the second crossing across the Memcombe blind channel. So I appreciate the effort by staff to recognize we needed that flexibility and the opportunities created with the developer to do that over time, especially with that right of way through the lane if it's so needed. I do really love the public realm that we've been able to achieve because we can raise Pemberton to this height and create a public realm, I think, that's unlike anything we've seen in the downtown core. The massing of the buildings and sort of breaking it up so that they're not just large monolithic buildings, I think is really important. I'm so pleased to see that we have, again, another standalone commercial building, which I think is so important to the downtown core. The daycare piece, I know we heard from the public, such a tough one to put off. I think we all would have liked to have seen it in the first phase, and we did ask those questions, but it's also really important to help transition any existing tenants that might want to stay in that area. And also we got better space for the daycare into phase 3. So a challenging trade-off. Maybe the consolation for working parents right now is that hopefully by the end of the year, we're going to see $20 a day daycare rather than the exorbitant fees everyone's experiencing now. And we are working on other childcare spaces across the district. So I think this meets so many of our climate-related priorities: affordable housing, childcare, commercial space. It's exceeded those expectations as well, so I'm happy to support this. I will call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Let's take a 10-minute break. We'll recess for 10 minutes, let everyone stretch their legs, and we'll come back and go back to our development variance permit. All right, thanks everyone for giving council and staff a bit of a recess there. So we're back to item 7A1, and this is a development variance permit for 42025 Government Road. And I'm turning it over to Mr. Prohalat for the presentation.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Vrish Prahalad, planner with the Community Planning Department. Tonight, I will be presenting DVP 11 located at 42025 Government Road, which is requesting one variance. The subject property is located at 42025 Government Road and is currently developed with a single unit dwelling. The property is zoned RS2 and the OCP land use designation is residential neighborhood. The properties in this neighborhood are also zoned RS2. The application seeks to permit the extension of the roof to cover a portion of the existing deck over the garage. The application is seeking a variance to section 8.6 of the zoning bylaw. The proponent is requesting a reduction in the rear yard setback from 7.62 meters to 1.47 meters. The subject property is a uniquely shaped triangle lot fronting Government Road. The location of the existing single unit dwelling does not meet the required rear yard setback. Staff are supportive of the variance request as it would allow for the construction of a covered outdoor space, which would allow the space to be enjoyed in all weather conditions. Given the unique shape of the lot, a variance would be required for any addition to the property. DVP 11 was posted to the district's development showcase and a development sign was installed on the property. No request for a public information meeting was received and no public information meeting was held. Variance notices have been sent out to residents within 100 meters of the property as per legislative requirements. One comment was received for this project. Staff recommend that the District of Squamish authorize the issuance of development variance permit number 11 as presented for the property located at 42025 Government Road, Squamish, British Columbia, and that the mayor and corporate officer be authorized to execute DVP 11. Alternatively, council could not authorize the development variance permit or refer the development back to staff. Thank you. At this time, I welcome any questions.
Thank you very much. Council, there is an opportunity for the public to speak to this as well as the proponent, but I will go to you first, see if you have any questions. Councillor Pettengill.
Yeah, thanks. If I understand the diagrams right, the existing setback where the variance is requested, it's a setback effectively from a railway right-of-way. Is that what I see in the diagrams?
Through the mayor, the setback is from the rear yard, the rear lot line. But it does back onto the railway.
Any other questions? All right. So the proponents and members of the public will be given the opportunity to be heard in person or electronically on your phone or from computer with respect to the proposed variances to District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2200/2011, section 8.6. The purpose of the proposed variances to section 8.6 minimum setbacks for principal buildings is for the rear yard setback from 7.62 meters to 1.47 meters. Details to participate via telephone or the WebEx platform are displayed on the screen. For those who have logged in from your computer or watching the live stream of the meeting and are included on the district website. So in order to get on the speakers list, you raise your hand on the telephone by dialing *3 or on WebEx by opening the participant panel and clicking on the hand icon. Please note there will be a moderator who will communicate with speakers participating online. And when it's your turn to speak, you will receive a voice prompt via telephone or a dialog box on WebEx. Please commence your remarks by clearly stating your name and address or neighborhood. Please note that speakers will be given a maximum of 5 minutes to address council. If you experience technical difficulties, please use the chat function to send the host a message or email your comments to hearing@squamish.ca. Any correspondence received during the hearing will be provided to council and will be uploaded to the agenda package online. So is there anyone at City Hall that wishes to speak to this variance request? And I'll go to Miss Murray. Is there anyone online? So *3 or raising your hand in the participants panel.
There's no one online, Mayor Elliott.
All right. Having no speakers here in City Hall, and just again remind people online that it's *3 or the hand icon in the participants panel. Council, any further questions you might have? All right, moderator, no one online? Good. So the staff recommendation is to approve the following variance. That's moved by Councilor Race, seconded by Councilor Hertford. Any discussion? Councilor Race?
Yeah, thank you. And I'm happy to support this. This is one of those variances that's prompted by a very challenging lot shape and is, in my view, what the variance process is for, is to alleviate that. And in this case, it's not moving a structure much closer to any neighbors. They're on the other side of a railroad right-of-way, and so not close at hand. So I don't imagine any negative impact to the neighbors. So happy to support this.
Councilor Hertford.
Thank you. I'll be supporting this. I think this variance is an interesting one in that it doesn't change the footprint of the building, which caught me off guard a little bit. But given the interesting shape of the lot and the sort of pre-existing location of the building to begin with, I think this is a very reasonable variance. And as Councilor Race stated, it's there's essentially no neighbors on that to the south for quite a ways, and then over the back is a rail right of way, which does have neighbors, but quite some distance away. So I see the impact being negligible, if any, to any properties in the area, and I'm happy to support it.
I don't see any other hands. I will call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ms. Murray, for moderating this evening. So we're on to item 8A1. First three readings, District of Squamish Business Park Road Closure Bylaw, number 2878, 2022. No, yep, not the one, not yet, Councilor Race. And Ms. Gill, am I turning it over to you?
Yes, that's correct. Just one sec here. All right. So good evening, Mayor and Council. For those of you watching at home, my name is Nav Gill. I'm from Real Estate Services, and I'm joined by John Allen from Engineering. We are here to obtain first three readings of two proposed road closure areas. So as highlighted in red, these are the two parcels that we are looking at closing in the business park. So as you can see, parcel B is adjacent to 1311 Pioneer Way, and then parcel A is just north of that. So these areas were reviewed as part of the Pioneer Way Extension capital project, and engineering recognized that these would not be needed as future road and was an opportunity for us to close these at this time. So parcel A has a district sanitary line and Fortis gas main that's being relocated in a later phase of the Pioneer Way project. And sorry, this was missed in the report to council, so apologize for that. So in the meantime, we will be working with Fortis for a right-of-way in this parcel. And then parcel B has a district sanitary line and a Fortis gas main that's being relocated this year as part of phase 1 of the project. In terms of next steps, we will be working with Fortis for a right-of-way for parcel A, and then we will seek MOTI approval, which is needed when you're within 800 meters of a highway. Then we will advertise SAT notices and then come back for adoption of the bylaw, after which we will execute the right-of-way agreement and then register all the plans. As such, we're seeking first 3 readings of the road closure bylaw and permission to advertise the statutory notices prior to adoption. And with that, we will turn it over to Mayor and Council for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Gill. Council, any questions on this road closure? All right. Seems pretty straightforward then. Councilor Herford, you're moving first 3 readings, seconded by Councilor French. Any comments? Go ahead, Councilor French.
Just speaking in favor of the motion, the creation of the Pioneer Way extension is going to take pressure away from Queensway and Government Road, from the Malcolm River Bridge through to the Queensway intersection, which I think residents along that stretch of road will be happy with. It also gives residents in the north end of Squamish better and more direct access to the business park. Just see this whole project being a positive. I support the motion and moving this project forward.
Thank you very much. Seeing no further hands, I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Great. Thank you
very much. Have a good evening. We are now on item, we've done 8B1. So we're now on 8C, a number of bylaws for adoption. So first up, District of Squamish Building Bylaw. This is our housekeeping and certified professional program update, number 2896-2022, be adopted. Moved by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor French. Any comments? Any opposed? Motion carries. The District of Squamish Fees and Charges Bylaw, amendment bylaw for permit extension fees, number 2897-2022, be adopted. By Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Pettengill. Any comments? Any opposed? Motion carries. And associated with that, the District of Squamish Municipal Ticket Information Bylaw. This is amendment bylaw for site safety number 2898-2022, be adopted. Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any comments? Any opposed? Motion carries. District of Squamish Notice Enforcement Bylaw. This again, site safety amendment number 2899-2022, be adopted. By Councillor Race, seconded by Councillor Herford. Any comments? Any opposed? Motion carries. District of Squamish zoning bylaw, amendment bylaw for the stage 3 general amendments, number 2824-2021, be adopted. Moved by Councillor French, seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any comments? Any opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Race.
Thank you. And this next one, I'm a potential purchaser in that development and have previously declared a conflict, and so recuse myself from this discussion.
Staff recommendation, the District of Squamish Garibaldi Springs Road Closure Bylaw number 2873-2021 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Pettengill, seconded by Councillor Herford. Any comments? Any opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Herford, if you could ask Councillor Race to come back in. We're now on to item 9A1. I believe I am turning it over to Mr. Buxton to speak about the Spuckwas Feather Park Consent and Acknowledgement Agreement.
Yes, thank you, Mayor and Council. I'll just pull up a brief presentation here. Oh, this is working far too easily. I spoke too short. There we go. Okay, thank you, Mayor and Council. As you noted, the consent and acknowledgement agreement between the district and Squamish Oceanfront Squamish developments It's really sort of addressing the details of how you get from what is now a 7-year-old phase development agreement, the PDA, to getting a park built today. So, that's the plan for the park that was attached to the PDA. There certainly isn't a lot of details. It's certainly not something you can create construction documents around. But I say at that point in time, we're negotiating a land sale, and trying to resolve those details at that point in time would have been very difficult, would probably still be there. So that was the level of detail that we had when we executed on the PDA, and now the consent agreement sort of tries to close the gap between that and getting the park built. That's probably now a month or so old, but the work in terms of getting the park, the base of the park constructed, that's the dirt, getting the dirt in place, is underway. So you can start to see it's a significant way out into the water, but that work is well underway to get the park done. The details are what's going to go really on top of that work. So in terms of the details, the phase development agreement had a number of supporting documents and spreadsheets, but in some cases we're left with interpreting the drawings contained in the sub-area plan. So again, it's been a little tricky, but what we have done is try and get this agreement based on some direction that's contained in the phase development agreement, which says that the developer has to do a certain number of things, so design and construct the park, the beach, dune grass area, pathways, a boardwalk, intertidal habitat, lands and monuments. So these are the sorts of things that have to get done prior to building occupancy. So what we're trying to do is understand, okay, well, so how does that get done? So the consent and acknowledgement agreement is the details. I mean, the PDA went as far as it could at the time in 2015. So some details couldn't be resolved without what would have been very painfully slow negotiations at that point in time. So we would still be negotiating. So this agreement attempts to resolve those details. It's really part land development agreement, and it's really part servicing agreement. So it occupies sort of an odd place as an agreement. So we have been increasing the levels of details as we go through. We're getting closer and closer to having specifications for landscaping, for furniture, for how wide are the pathways, what are they made of, how much grass goes where, what trees are there. So we're getting close. And to say some of the details that are in the plan are as follows. So the section 1A addresses the requirements to construct the park and lands and monument. It's restating largely what's in the PDA. Section 1A3 details a temporary ramp that we constructed while the sailing center is still being designed. So that allows the sailing center to be provided later. That work's running a little further behind the park, but it's still active. Section 1A3 also details that a public washroom is to be provided at the completion of the park. It's either at the park or at the sailing center or another option. At this point, we're looking at being in the park and having a permanent washroom available at opening of the park or prior to occupancy of the buildings. Section 1B provides significant details regarding what's known as the intertidal habitat or the habitat enhancement features regarding that are subject to a number of Department of Fisheries and Oceans approvals. The majority of the park care and maintenance will be assumed by the district after 1 year, and that's very typical for park developments. When a developer builds a new park, after a year, it's warranted, and we assume maintenance. The habitat enhancement features are a little different, however. We don't typically deal with these sorts of things, and the DFO approvals require that they're sort of established after 5 years. So they're going to be, the habitat enhancement features are going to be maintained by the developer for 5 years, much longer than the park itself, where we'll assume maintenance. If during that time or at the end of that time, if the features are not successful, then the developer has to work with the DFO to come up with an alternate plan. We're required to work with the developer to ensure that public access is restricted to the habitat enhancement, so we don't have a bunch of folks or dogs wandering through there and destroying the work that they've done. And largely, there won't be much of, if any, access into this area. It's a habitat enhancement area. Part of the details also deal with the remaining shares held by the district under the limited partnership agreement. They transfer back to the developer upon substantial completion of the park. Those are currently held by the Sustainability Corporation. Some additional items, lighting, design, and conduit will be provided. We'll need to provide the cable and fixtures. We're working with the developer on that right now. Irrigation will be provided, and then a playground has two options, up to 750,000 of what is a unique interactive play and art structure, or 250,000 in CSA approved playground equipment, which is the typical stuff that you see in parks and playgrounds. The other element in the agreement is that there's advanced consultation on Sparkler's Feather park bookings for the developer who's looking for a little bit of certainty that they'll have access to the park when they want it for events, such as the one that was done in the naming ceremony last summer. So we are, just in terms of those two options, we are actively pursuing the more expensive of those two options in terms of the play art structure with a local fabricator and designer. So looking to create something unique. We're at the very early stages of that. We're not defaulting to the CSA approved structures. We're going to see if we can work through. These come with very sort of interesting safety and maintenance features. So we need to work through those with the designer. We need to make sure that they're safe and we can look after them once they're in place. But there's certainly a very interesting option here to have something that's very different and very unique. These are samples of stuff that's done in our parks. These are not where we're heading with the. These are just illustrative. They're not where we're at with the design at present. So at that point, I can entertain council's questions on the agreement.
Thank you, Mr. Buxton. Council, any questions on this agreement as presented? Councilor Stoner?
Thank you, through the chair. Just one point of clarification with regards to the booking of the park by the developer. I just want to confirm if we'd be, if that booking is still subject to regular fees and charges, and if we have considered capping the number of days or weekends that the developer would have quote unquote priority access.
Sorry, through the chair, in order, yes, it would be subject to if we have fees for park bookings, and no, we haven't discussed a cap on those.
Anything else from council on this agreement? Can this be revised anytime by either party in agreement with the other? So if we come across something that's not working, can we amend this?
Yes, we would need to negotiate that with the developer.
All right, I'm not seeing any further hands. So the motion is to approve the consent and acknowledgement agreement between the district and Oceanfront Squamish Developments. Councilor Race, seconded by Councilor French. And Councilor Race, you can speak to that.
Thank you. Just briefly, because I know I was part of some of the negotiations that led to the creation of this PDA, and then subsequently I've been part of a committee that has been working to settle the terms and the location and details of the sailing center that's proposed. But I do want to say with respect to the sailing center that the developer has been very, very helpful and cooperative and I want to commend them for that. It's moved locations a couple of times. 33,000 square feet approximately has been set aside for it. We've had technical people come up to advise on the launch, the ramp that would be used for launching, its aspect and direction and slope and associated wharfing and so forth. And they've been very cooperative and receptive to the advice that they've received. So I'm grateful for that. I think it'll be one day a wonderful amenity for the community, and happy to support this.
Councillor French.
Even briefer from me. Let's get on with this. I'm looking forward to completion of this park. And I know I'm hearing loud and clear from Squamish residents that they want access to the waterfront, to the ocean, to enjoy the water that surrounds our community that's currently difficult to get to. So I support the staff recommendation. Thanks.
Councillor Stoner.
Thank you. I too will be supporting the motion on the floor. I think this is one of the challenges with these complex projects where, as staff mentioned, this PDA is from 7 years ago. It took a long time to negotiate, and we're still here looking at the details. And I don't think anybody expected this level of detail to be outlined in the PDA. And so I just have to recognize that there's a certain level of trust and agreement that has to go into those early agreements to then end up here and still at the table. And as Councillor Race mentioned, I think this developer in particular has been very amenable to those ongoing discussions and really being a partner in making this a reality. So I'm very excited to see this park move forward. And thanks for the continued work on making sure all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed as we work through the details.
All right, seeing no other hands, I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Buxton. Councilor, on to the consent agenda. Item 10, anything you were in conflict with, anything you'd like to pull. This is the time to do it. And I'm going to say that I am pulling letter 2 and 4. Anything else? Seeing no other hands, would someone like to move the remainder of the consent agenda? Moved by Councillor Herford, seconded by Councillor French. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, under item 12, correspondence, there is a letter from S. Golder requesting a letter of support for the Squamish Valley Equestrian Association. This is for council consideration. Councillor Herford.
Thank you. I'd like to move that we supply a letter of support.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any comments? Go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you. I think this is a reasonable request. We've with our recently completed Brennan Park sort of lands work, I think we've accounted for space for these folks, and they're looking to improve to pursue some grants to improve their facilities. And I think it's totally appropriate that we provide the support for them to do that. And I look forward to them being successful in their quest.
Councillor Reese.
Well, my only question was, I think they needed the letter of support before today, and I'm just wondering how we might accomplish that.
We're very efficient in the mayor's office. So I'm just going to roll back time. No, it is often the case that nonprofits can submit their applications with some support letters pending because funders know that local governments work on their own timelines. So we'll get that out as soon as possible. Councillor Anderson.
Yes, I would only add that a comment to the effect that the Squamish Valley Equestrian Association has done some good work in identifying fundraising opportunities. I've always done so, but they've discovered new pockets of kind of grant money. I wish them well. But I think we should acknowledge the hard work that they've been doing over the years in fundraising and partnering with other community events and festivals such as Squamish Days in their efforts to do their own work on that complementary part of their needs.
Councillor Pettingill?
Yeah, I just have a bit of hesitation, and notwithstanding my colleagues' comments, my recollection from the fields, the last draft we saw was that we had a question earmarked, I think, into the medium term, but then into the long term, which this asked support for, as I read it, we weren't so sure there. So through this, are we committing to that, which I don't think we made that commitment in the plan?
Are you asking your council colleagues, yourself, or would you like an answer from staff? It just sounded like you were wondering there versus.
Well, I am sort of wondering, do I have that wrong? Or I guess is council's intention to sort of set that direction, or this is something council figures we can worry about later?
I would suggest that it is on the agenda without a staff presentation because staff haven't seen a barrier to our support. And I think that if they were concerned, they would have made that visible to us. And I think what we've agreed to in the Lands Master Plan is a group of principles around multi-use spaces, shared spaces, and also one of these structures can be moved if need be. It's not a permanent building. It's a very sturdy tent. So does that help? Yeah. Councillor French?
Speaking in favor of the motion and sharing some information that I received from Stephanie Golder, who's driving this request. They're specifically looking for a letter of support stating that from the owner of the land that they have a lease, and they do have a lease. So this is a very straightforward letter that I don't think poses any complications with the future plans that we have for that area. So I support the motion.
I will call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. So I just want to speak briefly to the letters I pulled. The one from President Iwama at Quest University, they are looking to award their first honorary degree this year. The deadline for nominating people is this Friday. But if council was aware of someone who is worthy of this honor, just wanted to make people aware. So motion to receive. Moved by Councillor French, second by Councillor Herford. Any opposed? Motion carries. And then letter 4 is from Tanzan Smith about community benefits agreement and the next step in inclusive economic growth. And this letter certainly has to do with our social procurement policies. And I really want to thank Ms. Smith for bringing this forward. It's, and it's got backup material and she's really thought this through. And I would say to her, this is a step on our road to continue to embed social procurement into our policies. But I would like to refer this letter to our manager of procurement and our director of community development and infrastructure so that they can see that there's community interest in how we achieve these types of benefits in large projects over time. I think it's a very strategic way to start to consider large projects within our boundaries. Councillor Anderson, are you seconding that?
Actually, Mayor Elliott, I wanted to offer a friendly amendment.
Go ahead.
To add that it be referred also to the Economic Development Department and the Sustainability Department managers, and I would speak to that if we have a seconder.
I will take that as a friendly amendment. Go ahead.
As Mayor Elliott has suggested, and I'm sure that we've all gone through this correspondence, it's the most interesting package and very valuable information. I very much appreciate Talman Smith's initiative. There are much of the package comes from City of Vancouver, And within the supporting documents and studies, there's a focus on really two themes. How can we do better in employing people locally? And how can we do better in buying materials and services locally? And the Community Benefits Agreement policy of the City of Vancouver has 7 principles, and the last one is of interest here. Complement existing and emerging policies. Well, we have a bunch of existing and emerging policies, and I'll just like to list them, and this is my rationale for passing on to those 2 departments. Our Economic Development and Sustainability departments are engaged in the Circular Economy Roadmap. And among the themes of that roadmap is the built environment. How can we do better to buy local services and buy local materials? We have also the economic development strategy with a mapping and developing clusters, including the building sector. And this issue of clusters and local material suppliers is dealt with at length in the City of Vancouver documents. We have our housing society. And in that housing society, like in Vancouver, there seem to be benefits in having private sector developers and construction industry people with seats on the board. That is part of the complementary things that we are doing. They can advise on how we can strategize to acquire local services and materials. And they are doing so in Vancouver. We have our demolition bylaw, more circular economy, and our procurement policy that Mayor Elliott has referred to. Our goals, the goals of a community benefits agreement policy are already incorporated in much that we are already doing. And I'm suggesting that the Economic Development Department and the Sustainability Department would benefit. If they haven't seen this correspondence in the backup documents, they would find it most interesting reading for the work that they're already doing.
Councillor Pettengill?
Yeah, thanks. Happy to support the motion. Councillor Anderson pulled out the same element from the Vancouver policy that I did. And, it does speak about complementing existing policies. And what my mind went into immediately thinking about the IPCC report is our carbon reduction policies and so on. So, from my perspective, community benefit goes, and I think our social procurement, as I recall, does as well, needs to pay attention to it's not just about employment, but it's about some of these other critical things. I found it was interesting. It does speak to voluntary benefits agreements versus, I guess, ones where the municipality has a bit of leverage. And, I guess I'm wondering a little bit what the value is in a voluntary one in effort versus cost versus benefit. But overall, I support our staff having a look at this. The other piece, seeing one of the examples used was wood fiber. And I kind of was a bit surprised seeing some of the numbers in their report, because it's very different than numbers I've seen to the EA submissions and so on and so forth. So it got me wondering, how do these things get validated, and how do you hold people accountable when they say, hey, we're delivering these benefits, these are benefits of our project, and then these things, it just made me really wonder when you start seeing different numbers, how those things get checked, and so just making sure that if we proceed down this road, that the benefits overall are there. Thank you.
Thanks. Oh, did I see another hand? Councillor Stoner? Oh, I thought you. Okay. Call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. We're on to item 14. We have recommended motions in front of us from February 22nd Committee of the Whole. The first one is that the District of Squamish receive the Pandemic Insights Report for information and incorporate comments provided by Council at the February 22nd, 2022 Committee of the Whole. Hey, moved by Councillor French. Thanks for playing. And seconded by Councillor Herford. Any further comments on this? Seeing none. Any opposed? Motion carries. We also had a presentation that day from the Climate Change Law Initiative, and so a motion coming out of that staff bring back to a future committee of the whole, a discussion on climate risk assessment and climate risk reporting. supported by the work, the manager of sustainability and climate change. I want to check with council. I didn't remember putting in regarding pricing carbon, but rather just the part about the impact tool for climate reporting. So I would kind of like to take out the words regarding pricing carbon. So would just read the manager of sustainability and climate change on the impact tool for climate reporting. Seconded by Councillor Stoner. Is that clear, Ms. Pollock, what I just did there? Okay. Any further comments? Call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. And then finally, our public space survey results and covered structures that council directs staff to proceed with the exploration and installation of small covered structures throughout the district of Squamish as part of the covered structure budget for 2022. And the council directs staff to proceed with planting new trees at Eagle Wind Park as part of the covered structure budget for 2022. Moved by Councillor Race, second by Councillor French. Any further comments on this? Any opposed? Motion carries. Any business arising from the minutes? Seeing none. We have nothing under item 16. No in-camera announcements. We did not have unscheduled public attendance. Harley, is there anyone online for open question period? Would our one person in the gallery have any questions for open question period? All right, or clarification. Councillor staff announcements, item 20. Councillor French.
Thank you. I just want to draw attention to a public open house that's scheduled for Thursday, March the 10th regarding the Chima Lands DL District Lot 509, 510. It's scheduled to start at 4 p.m. and go through until 6:30 at the Executive Inns and Suite. So again, that's Thursday, March the 10th, 4 till 6:30, public information meeting regarding the Chima Lands.
Councillor Anderson.
Yes, I just wanted to relate that Councillor Pettingill and I had the opportunity to join in a program last Thursday, I think it was, organized by our sustainability manager, Dr. Ian Pickett's, called a Biomass Blitz. It was a tour. We were hosted by two Squamish Nation small businesses. On Checkham's Reserve number 11 by our landfill waste management team and by Squamish Wood Waste up in the Chikai Fan. It was a very interesting day looking at how people are making do with low-grade wood material. All their ideas. The Squamish Nation folks are underemployed these days with the temporary, hopefully, shutdown of Squamish Forestry. They're making do in firewood sales, finding things to do with alder and maple. And we also had a good discussion about implications for our community forest in managing wood waste, mostly the importance of forest fire prevention. We also heard about broad policy things that we as a council might join with other municipalities in monitoring and maybe doing a little bit of advocacy work. One, BC Hydro's policy of no longer purchasing electricity from biomass power units. That includes Port Mellon, and that has taken away a huge opportunity in our dealing with wood waste. Secondly, stumpage appraisal policies that discriminate against proper utilization of our wood wastes and dealing with them. And there's been recently a new committee formed within the forest sector to address those, and perhaps we could join them in that the community forest is equally affected. So good job, Mr. Pickett's. Very enjoyable and educational tour. Thank you.
Councillor Pettingill.
Yeah, I'd just like to acknowledge that tour was fantastic, and I learned a lot, and it was great to be out in the forest and seeing what's actually going on the ground, and I really appreciated the opportunity. And maybe spending too much time with Councillor Anderson, because I ran into him again Saturday evening at Connor Lum's jazz quintet performance at Eagle Eye Theatre. The high school jazz band also played out in the foyer. the level of musicianship was incredible. It was a wonderful night, very well attended, and I think everyone was just super happy to be out seeing live music in Squamish, and so it was a great evening.
I couldn't go on the tour because I was at the SLRD meetings, which were fascinating. We are deep into budget right now, so it was a lot of budget discussions, and we're wrestling with how to increase capacity at the SLRD, and in the same way that we've seen it in the district, the EOC was open even more days at the regional level with all the fires, especially in Area B, up around Lillooet. And we still have residents in Area C under evacuation order because of land slippage above their properties on Reed Road in the Pemberton Valley. And it is extremely distressing for them to be out of their homes and not have a clear timeline of when they will be able to move back into their homes. And of course, you can understand that would have a lot of impact personally and financially. So we have agreed to add capacity in the emergency operations or emergency management part of the organization. Also, like us, they've been experiencing more pressure from FOIs. So looking at legislative staff, we have brought on the new climate change and sustainability equivalent to Dr. Pickett's. So now we'll have someone working at that level at the regional level as well, which is really exciting when we think about just the collaboration we've been able to start to do with Whistler and other communities. Because we have people focused on that file, we're now adding that regional perspective. So all of that will be coordinated and brought on board once those budgets are approved by our new CAO, Craig Dalton, who's coming to us from City of Lethbridge, and he arrives on March 7th. So looking forward to having him on board. And current CAO Helmer will help transition him into the role. It's my little update from the SLRD, and I wish I had kind of been on the forestry tour. So yes, lots going on in the community. People should start actually looking at social events. They are starting to happen, and getting more and more invites to things in my calendar. So council, be prepared to be busy again. So with that, motion to terminate. Moved by Councillor Stoner, seconded by Councillor Herford. Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you to our staff who supported us tonight. Thank you, council, and thanks to the public who participated.